see. I think we are live, but I am not 100% sure. So, okay, now I think we are live. So, welcome everybody to our weekly Wednesday evening live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, if you are new here, welcome. And if you are returning here, welcome. If you would like to be notified when I go live, you can request a text alert by texting the words Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. And you will get a message from me when I go live. And also, if you guys are interested in some words of encouragement, you can text the words I thrive, all one word, to the number 22999 and be subscribed to that as well. So, with that, let me jump into the chat here and say hello. I have a couple questions that people have sent in, and I guess I'll cover that real quick too. If you have a question that you would like for me to cover on a future live stream, you can email it to me at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com, and I will do my best to answer it on a future live stream. Just make sure to let me know what name you would like me to say on the air. So, okay, let me pull up my questions here. First one here is from Greg, who says, Hi, Dana. I just wanted to get your advice on recovery after being discarded by a person with borderline personality disorder. The relationship lasted for 2 months. There were red flags, were definitely present before and during the relationship. I have the tendency and try to work things out with people. I like to give everyone that I meet the benefit of the doubt, but situations don't always work out. My ex pushed every boundary of mine that she could until I decided to end the relationship. Then, after I broke up with her, the very next day, she posted on Facebook that she was in a new relationship. In the coming days, she posted multiple pictures with her new supply and just showed no sympathy towards me. And her friends are encouraging her behavior. It's been 7 months now, and I'm still struggling with constant flashbacks of my time with her and the knowing of being discarded like I never existed. So, okay. So let's kind of go through this kind of point by point. I guess some of the things that stick out to me is, well, that you broke up with her. So if I'm reading your email correctly, she didn't discard you. You ended things with her. However, it sounds like where the hurt is coming from is that you're upset that she moved on so easily. And relationships that are very intense, that run very hot and cold, and they can cover a lot of ground in a very short amount of time. So, um, a 2 month relationship like that can feel a lot longer. And in many ways, that's why some people have a hard time kind of moving forward and they feel so deeply traumatized by it because so much happened in such a short amount of time. So, that is part of it. And in terms of the, um, you mentioned knowing that you were discarded like you never existed. I would encourage you to ask yourself, what are you telling yourself about her actions? When she's posting all these pictures of her new boyfriend on Facebook and all of this, are you telling yourself that you didn't matter or that you don't matter? That the issue is somehow you? Is it hurt that she seems to kind of move on effortlessly, why you feel like you poured so much into the relationship and it just meant nothing to her? Because those are all very valid. With that said, I would encourage you to not internalize her behavior. So while it's profoundly hurtful when we have a relationship with someone and they move on so quickly, that lack of emotional depth that they had um, isn't a reflection of you. It's a reflection of what's going on with them. So she may or may not, and part of the email that I didn't cover is you'd mentioned, she's goes from relationship to relationship. She has a bunch of exes that she continues to keep seeing, this kind of thing. It sounds like there's kind of this pattern of like superficial relationships anyhow. But even if there isn't, then, the two of you only dated for 2 months. And I know for you, there was a lot of depth there and a lot of feeling there, but for her, there wasn't. And and frankly, I would encourage you moving forward from this to kind of pull some of these emotions back to where you're not so completely all in emotionally so soon, because it takes time. It takes time. And I will say this requires a level of self-restraint that I think oftentimes just comes from learning things the hard way. So realizing that it takes time to truly get to know a person. We don't even begin to start knowing a person until we're about 3 months in. And especially if they're showing a bunch of red flags. So kind of getting deeply emotionally invested, and then kind of having the strategy of, well, I'm just going to give this person the benefit of the doubt that she's going to somehow magically change into the kind of partner that I need her to be, or that I want her to be. That that's setting yourself up to fail time and time and time again. So I would encourage you to approach dating differently in the future. um, but in terms of, and just to slow things down. Um, but back to the not internalizing her behavior, it's okay to have hurt feelings. It's understandable. You fell hard, you fell fast in this relationship. Try to separate these hurt feelings from your self-worth. So again, her behavior, it's a sign she wasn't that emotionally invested. This doesn't mean that you're not worth being emotionally invested in. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean anything about you. It just means that she just wasn't that emotionally invested. And that and I would encourage you to realize that you kind of acknowledge what you do bring to the table in a relationship, and that you do have worth. And if she doesn't see it, then that's really too bad. And hopefully that you can find somebody in the future who does see it. And also, frankly, somebody in the future who's not a project, not somebody that you're going to have to use hope as a strategy with. Because hope as a strategy, it's it's not being optimistic, it's being in denial. And that can drag a person, it will drag you through hell. A lot of unnecessary hell. There's Hope gets this real um like good rap, I guess. Um, People kind of see hope as this good thing, and it's not. It, it, it's really not. It can be very, very damaging. So it's important that we see reality clearly, see the behavior of other people clearly, understand, get grounded within your boundaries, your standards, your deal breakers, and realize that uh, we stay in relationships with people not based on how we feel about them, but based on how we're being treated. So we can feel all kinds of feelings about somebody. Oh, I love them so much. They're so amazing. The sex is great, or I just have this amazing connection with them, or whatnot. That's interesting. And that's very emotional, but it's not a reason to stay in a relationship with somebody. And that, I know that goes kind of counter to all of the advice that we've all been sold over the years about dating, but that's only a very small part of it. That level of chemistry, it tends to be there when there's that connection with another person, but it's tends to also uh, it's not the foundation of a relationship. There's other more important things that need to be there. And if you're being mistreated, then it absolutely um, we have to kind of nurse our hurt feelings, but then pack things up and then leave. Okay. So let me see. Oh, okay, yeah, chat's going. Um Yeah, Monica says hope as a strategy is exhausting. Yes. And let me see. Um, Kangaroo Kid says, my narcissist abuser is in my small prayer group. She is a backstabber and snakes my friends. Should I quit this prayer group to protect myself? Let me kind of flip the question around. What do you need to do in order to protect your safety and your sanity? So answering that question is going to be your North Star in all of this. And I would encourage you to always be asking yourself that question. So if right now, if this prayer group feels very unsafe, because it is very unsafe with this woman in it, um, then okay, what do you need to do in order to protect your safety and your sanity? If being assertive isn't going to help, which it won't with a person like that, if talking to your friends about it won't help, if then yeah, it's time to switch up some sort of strategy. You'll know when you have the answer that you need based on the level of peace that you have in your life. So if leaving this prayer group is causing you to feel all kinds of anxious and angry and resentful and on edge and all of that, then this isn't a constructive place for you anymore. And so creating or um, finding another group, finding another time, these kinds of things, it's more likely than not going to be worth the kind of the loss of your old group, because your old group is now no longer safe emotionally for you. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Alley Cat says, hi, it's the first I've listened to the live chat. Well, welcome. Welcome, welcome. Michelle says, I've been in deep self examination lately and it's been tough. I'm at that, am I a narcissist phase, or I think I need to stop researching. So, okay, well, here's the thing with, I guess to start, that's very normal. I think most people, well, I shouldn't say, kind of given their situation, it's not uncommon for a person in an attempt to try to figure out what's going on to kind of try to cover all the bases. And that oftentimes means that level of introspection of, oh my gosh, am I the narcissist? Am I too demanding? Did I cause, am I the cause of all of this? And oh my gosh, um, and that can be, you know, it can really rock a person to the core. Ask yourself about, here's a better question to ask yourself. Ask yourself, if you were to uncover some problematic behavior that you had, would you be open to exploring it and willing to work on it? And if the answer is yes, then don't worry about it. You're fine. You're that's perfectly that's not even perfectly normal, that's exceptional, because it's very, very difficult for any one of us to examine our own behavior uh, critically and to accept, gosh, am I doing some things that are problematic? And frankly, the answer, if we are in a dysfunctional relationship, the answer is yes, that there are things that we're doing that, or there's a mindset, or there's a series of actions, something's going on there. So there's a certain level of dysfunction there. It was either there before this relationship, but I'd put money on it that it's definitely there after this relationship. Uh, so most of us are walking around with very dysfunctional messages about life and love and relationships and commitment and marriage and responsibility and accountability and boundaries and communication and all of these things. And because we are, as George Carlin once said, we are all our own baseline for normal. Anybody that drives faster than us is a maniac. Anybody that drives slower than us is a Sunday driver, right? It's the same thing with behavior across the board. We are our own baseline for normal. For that reason, it's very difficult for us to actually acknowledge that anything that we're doing is a problem, especially if everybody around us, friends or family, or the vast majority of people around us are doing the same thing as us. This is how dysfunction becomes a generational thing, because it's a lot of it's learned behavior that's just passed down from generation to generation. That's just how everything is role modeled. This is how we handle frustration in our house. This is how we handle anger in our house. This is how we handle um, uh, confrontation. This is how we handle everything. And we don't tend to think of it that way, right? But that's exactly what it is. And so we've picked up all of this stuff. And frankly, it's not until a really traumatic relationship that that things become so broken that we're like, I can't keep going the way that I'm going. And then we're forced to stop and start examining pieces of our life and figuring out, okay, what needs to happen different, because I can't keep going like this. So uh, like Gary, the first, well, I think I've only read his question so far. The first question that I read this evening, he was talking about, I give people the benefit of the doubt. And that's one of those messages that is that's cloaked. It flies under the radar of, oh, this is something that's really good. This is a virtue, right? Except that it's not. It's a problem. It's a problem if we're giving people the benefit of the doubt when because that's basically, I'm trusting people, right? I'm freely trusting people. Well, that's a problem, especially if their behavior shows that they're not trustworthy. It's a problem if we value commitment at all cost, if the cost is sacrificing our sanity or sacrificing our physical health. It's a problem if we value marriage, if our partner doesn't. It's a problem if we uh, think that we need to be friends with everybody. So if an ex says, oh, well, can we still be friends? And then we somehow feel obligated to continue having them in our life, even though there's nothing nourishing that's coming from that. They just push our buttons, they cross our boundaries, all of that. It's a problem if we think that boundaries don't belong in a relationship. Some people have that belief. Trying to think of some other ones. It's a problem if we think that kind of family family is forever, in the sense of out of obligation and guilt, I will always be there for you. No matter what you need, I will always say yes, because that's what family does. That's a problem. And it's the problem if it's causing harm to you financially or physically or emotionally or psychologically, or harm to your marriage or harm to your children. Trying to think of some other. Oh, another disempowering message is forgive and forget. Sounds great. I mean, all of these sound great on the surface, right? Uh, but forgive and forget doesn't mean that we try to convince ourselves that we're okay with what happened to us, or that we need to allow a problematic person back into our life in order to give them a second chance at hurting us. So what all of these kind of well-intended pieces of advice or messages, that these kind of well-intended messages that we tend to pick up about family and love and commitment and all these things, the missing piece to all of this is that they're missing the context of boundaries, standards, and deal breakers. So without that context, you can see, you get a problematic, like a deeply problematic person in the mix, and whoo, things go south real fast. That's why it's so important that we have that healthy understanding of responsibility, of accountability, of of and that you realize it's, yeah, boundary, standards, and deal breakers. It's part of being a human being. It's a necessary part of having your life work. And um, you know, it's it's just part of it. And um, yeah, so kind of examining that and realizing, okay, yeah, there's probably some ways that there has been some problematic thinking or behaving. I would encourage you, then this can be a little bit challenging, uh, but try to approach your own behavior from a lens of curiosity instead of judgment. And there's a couple reasons for that. When we approach our own behavior from a place of curiosity, there's less defensiveness. And whenever we feel defensive about something, we're not teachable. We're not open to examining any other way of doing it. We dig our heels in and we're like, nope, this is right, you're wrong, kind of a thing. And there's nothing's happening while a person's feeling defensive. So that's part of it. And the judgment piece of it, which tends to judgment and defensiveness tend to go hand in hand, it's not helpful. So feelings of shame especially are not helpful. Guilt can sometimes be appropriate depending on how we've behaved, but the difference there is shame is the feeling of I am bad versus guilt is I've done something bad. If we have a shame-filled way of seeing our behavior of I am bad, there's we have now stagnated, because what's the point of trying to change anything, right? I'm bad. I'm bad, so there's no hope. Uh, that doesn't help. That creates a very uh, kind of limiting. It really limits a person's possibility for change. If we've done something, if our behavior has hurt other people, then and here's the thing, there's also a difference between guilt and regret. Guilt is not only I've done something wrong, but it's I've done something wrong intentionally. There's an intentionality about guilt that goes hand in hand with guilt. If we did something wrong that hurt somebody, but that was not our intention, then there's no need to feel guilt because there wasn't that hurtful intention there. So reframing it to regret, like, "Oh my gosh, I did not mean for this to hurt this person. It did, and now I feel I'm just so deeply saddened by that." Or I'm hurt that they're hurt, right? So we have regret for it. So kind of getting clear, I think, can help. But I've yet to meet anybody that's gone through this whole process of understanding um, mm, a problematic person. We'll kind of make this very general. A, a person with problematic behavior, we'll put it that way. If I haven't come across anybody that's come to these live streams, myself included, who has left thinking, "Oh, yep, I've got nothing within me to change. Totally fine. Totally fine." And I will tell you that seeing seeing our own behavior clearly is very, very difficult because we're so close to it. Um, in my situation, the two of my situations, I really struggled for a long time of I I wanted to be accountable for some piece of it. I was like, "Man, I just," because to not be was sort of like, well, then it was a fluke, but it was a fluke that happened twice, and it's sort of like getting hit by lightning twice. Uh, I don't Now I'm scared to go outside, kind of a thing, and I wanted to know where I was going wrong, but I just couldn't identify it. And because both of the well, this time around, both of the men that I was tangled up with were just sociopathic, but they were very charming, very likable. There wasn't any overt abuse of any kind. I had a really difficult time identifying it. It wasn't until kind of years into my journey that it was, oh, I have all kinds of dysfunctional beliefs about relationships and about trusting other people. And, um, I had an external locus of evaluation where I was looking outside of myself for other people for approval. And not all the time, but some of the time for people to kind of vote. Like I would ask, like, well, what do you think I should do? And I would give their opinion a heck of a lot more weight than it deserved and a heck of a lot more weight than my own. Oh gosh, there's so many lessons I've learned. Um, One of the big ones was realizing that uh, I don't have to quote unquote give a person the benefit of the doubt. If they start showing red flags or behavior that I'm just uncomfortable with, then I can leave. I don't need to wait. I don't need to wait for that smoke to I don't need to wait till I see flames to realize that there's a problem. Like, if there's smoke, there's a problem. And that was huge for me because that's what I had been doing. I felt like it was judgmental or I was being too hasty. If I would break things off early on, I felt that need for concrete proof. So these are just some of the like the lessons that can or dysfunctional messages that can fly under the radar that as we go through this healing process we start to examine and hopefully are able to shift into something that's a lot more adaptive and empowering. So I hope that that kind of helps. Let's see, let me scroll here. Debbie says, I want it to be partly my fault so I can feel responsible for some of the 33 years I was married. Yeah. And it depends on like what your experience was. So while we weren't responsible for the abuse, we were responsible for staying. So if we stayed, then kind of examining, okay, what were the hooks that had us? And sometimes it's not dysfunctional messages. Sometimes it's very uh, real things. Sometimes it's finances. Sometimes it's religion. Um, Sometimes it's a person living in a culture where they can't leave. Um, sometimes there's just extenuating circumstances. But yeah, so it can help to kind of parse out like, okay, here's the thing. Yeah, parsing, okay, what am I responsible for in this? And what am I not responsible for in this? And while you're doing that, being very clear with yourself that you're not 100% responsible for things in your relationship. So, uh, if a person had deal breaker behavior, if they had abusive behavior, or I mean, any other kind of deal breaker behavior, and you left, like that's not on you, that's on them for having that behavior. So, your action of leaving is the natural consequence for deal breaker behavior. especially if you've made it clear to them. So, okay, let me. Monica asks, could you speak a little bit about intermittent explosive disorder? I was recently diagnosed with it. Interesting. Well, intermittent explosive disorder is pretty much like what the name sounds like. It's where a person has mm, pretty much no ability to handle uncomfortable emotions. They go from 0 to 10 very fast. So they intermittently explode, and it can be through real or perceived uh, mm, kind of real or perceived situations. Although I would be hesitant if you are recently out of abuse. I just would be very hesitant to assign a a diagnosis of that, because that level, again, I don't know your situation. I don't know you. I don't know how long that's been going on. But if going from 0 to 10, feeling very activated very easily, uh, more often than not, that's a sign. Especially if you've been through abuse, that's a sign of trauma. It's a sign of unprocessed trauma. So uh, I don't know. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that disorder, or that diagnosis, and how accurate does that feel for you? And how long have you been feeling that way or acting that way? Um, okay, Michelle says, yeah. Okay, thanks, Dana. Yeah, she says, I wanted everyone to like me. Okay. Yeah, and you see how, like, on the surface that sounds so great, right? Like, oh, that's so wonderful that you kind of, the peacekeeper. You want everybody to like you. You want everybody to get along. Um, you want everybody to work together. That's great. But if it's not within boundary standards, deal breakers, it's deeply problematic. And if that's the only way, if the only tool we have in our toolkit in order to make relationships work is our niceness or ingratiating behavior, then the result of that long term is then we start silencing parts of ourselves so that other people like us. And the damage that does is it's really deep. And the good news is I fully believe with every ounce of my being that the core of who we really are is always there. It's always intact. It's just a matter of uncovering it. Um, but when a person goes through life thinking, well, I want other people to like me, or I need their approval, or I just want to keep the peace. And then they realize, oh my gosh, I've silenced so much of myself. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't really know what I dislike. I don't really have a solid sense of identity. I feel like I'm very kind of, I don't really have any strong opinions, right? And and uh, that, yeah, that can be concerning. So while it's wonderful to get along with other people, it's important that we also know ourselves and get along with ourselves, and aren't silencing those parts of ourselves just because other people don't approve or can't relate or whatever. This kind of stuff starts early in childhood, oftentimes by well-intended parents, but it especially happens with abusive, controlling parents. And the message is, well, if you're doing something that I don't approve of, if you're not growing into the person that I want you to be, then there's going to be consequences, right? So, uh, yeah. And like I said, parents do this in many ways that are unintentional. Um, but oftentimes with abusive parents, it's very intentional. Oh, if you're going to be a doctor, there is no other alternative. I don't want to hear any more about art school. You're going to be a doctor. Or you're not gay. No son of mine is gay, kind of a thing. Or, well, what do you mean you're Catholic? We're Jewish in this household. Or what do you mean you're vegetarian? You know what I mean? And so there's no allowance for differences in very rigid authoritarian homes, but the differences in people are there because we're all individual, like we're all different. So kind of reconnecting with that, that's a big part of kind of stepping into our own and kind of living that authentic life is kind of knowing who you are and what nourishes you and what drains you, and across the board on every level with friendships and relationships and um, you know just everything. So okay. AB says, hey, Dana, I had to call the cops today on my neighbor for beating her kids. She lied to the cops, and the little kid told the cops, don't hurt my mommy. My dad is also the landlord, so I must just leave it alone so I can continue living in peace. I don't want my dad to lose his tenants, I guess. Well, that's a very common situation. So when there is violence in the home or there's a complaint filed, the next step, it's very common. The cops will show up. If it's child abuse, the parent will say, I didn't do anything. Right? My child's being dramatic, or the neighbor hates us, or they'll have some sort of excuse. It's very rare that the person's like, hell yeah, I was beating my kid. And that's a huge problem if they do. But either way, even if the parent does admit to it, it's going to go to Child Protective Services, and they're going to investigate. So it's not going to just end there. They don't just take the parent's word for it and then uh, drop it. So so yeah, you've done your part in that. And it might take a week or two for a case to be put in motion. And the reality is, and you may never know, because CPS, they are, social workers in normal cars. It's not like they're going to roll up in a cop car. It's not like there's going to be a big scene necessarily. They're probably going to call the parents. They're going to make some appointments, all of that, which you might not see. I would encourage you, though, if you do hear them abusing their child again, to call the police again. So, um, yeah, because little kids rely on adults to keep them safe, and if their own parents aren't keeping them safe, then they rely on those of us around them that do see what's going on to be their voice. And I know it's uncomfortable, and I know it can be awkward, and uh, all of the other emotions that come along with that. But if there's child abuse going on, I think it's important. It's important to be that voice for that child. That child doesn't have a voice in this situation. Okay, so let me scroll here. Okay, here's another question. This is from Marta, who says, "Dear Dana, I've listened to your live streams for years now. You've saved me many times with your knowledge and very calm voice. Oh, thank you. You helped me survive a terrible discard and a divorce, but what's more important, you helped me to thrive. Thank you for everything." Oh, you are so welcome. am thrilled for you. I have a question, and hopefully, you can advise something in my quite unusual and complicated situation. I divorced my narcissistic ex 4 years ago after a 13-year relationship. Among many awful things, he cheated on me with a married woman from his work. She also divorced her husband because of that affair, and now she and my ex, live together. 3 years later, I met her ex husband. She cheated on him with my ex, and now we are slowly developing a new relationship. We have a lot in common. We're both empaths. We support our individual as well as relationship growth. My ex found out about this just recently and started a smear campaign about my new partner to everyone, including my 10-year-old son. He's also using his flying monkeys, who don't even know my partner, to discredit him to my son. I gray rock my ex, but I need to somehow deal with it and explain to my son that I didn't share details of this configuration with him before. How do I explain this to my child? Should I contact my ex and try to ask him to stop? Is there anything that you would advise in this situation? I really appreciate your insight. With love, Marta. So, yeah, this is tricky. At a minimum, I would try to get everything in writing, and I would keep your eyes open for parental alienation, which it sounds like is already happening. And parental alienation is when one parent, either intentionally or unintentionally, manipulates the child and turns the child against the other. So, like I said, this can happen intentionally or unintentionally. This situation, it's happening intentionally. So, whether that's intentional to your ex, because again, people that have boundary issues tend to not, they're not aware of when they step over them, but a court would see it as intentional. So if your ex is turning your child into uh, an adult and sharing with him very adult things and painting a bad picture of you, then that's a problem. And that's something that I would say is worth contacting your attorney about. Uh, it is also potentially, I mean, it's worth talking to your ex about. And I mean, the audacity, right? I mean, it's just jaw dropping. Like, okay, you're going to cheat on me with this woman. You're going to break up a marriage, leave your child. You're going to go shack up with her. And then you're going to get upset because 3, 4 years later, I start dating and I move on. Yeah, I get that it's super awkward situation that I'm now dating a little close to your relationship. I get that. But still, I mean, it's give me a break. So this is um, a train he put in motion, and um, yeah, his feelings are the way he's expressing them. It's very inappropriate, and it's not okay to hurt your son about it over it. So I don't know what all he's telling your son. If anything, your son's 10 years old. I um, I would let him know that, uh, and I don't know if you've told your son that you've dated in the past, or if this is the first relationship that he's heard of you being in, or what. But I would just say, um, I I I am dating, and I love you very much. And because I love you very much, I wanted to make sure that any man that I was dating, that relationship had the potential, that had a future, that relationship was going to be, um, with somebody that I thought I had a future with before I introduced you to them. And I'm getting to know this man, and um, you know, I wish that I could have been the one to talk to you about this instead of you finding out through other people, but that's not the way that this happened. And your son's probably going to be very hurt. And he's probably going to be very upset, and he's probably going to have a lot of questions. And uh, yeah, so this is where it can get uh, this is where it can get a little tricky, and it might be worth a phone call to your attorney to say, my ex is kind of poisoning the well like this. Part of me wants to set the story straight, and say, well, this is how I know this man. I wouldn't have ever probably met him had my ex not cheated and started living with the woman that he cheated on me with. Like, that's how I met this guy. And I would tell your ex, what is your plan? Like, I don't know what to tell our son about this. I don't want to paint, uh, um, I don't want to poison the well, but I also don't want to lie either. And if, the reality is your son will eventually find out. So kind of getting clear with your ex on how we're going to proceed with this. And then when you're talking to your son uh, about it, and again, depending on how you and your ex, if you and your ex decide to tell your, I don't, he might already know, I don't know, that his father had an affair and that's what ended the marriage. And uh, that, here's how things went down. It's going to be some very uncomfortable conversations that you might be having a lot sooner than later. But at a minimum, I would include in that conversation exploring your son's emotions about what his father is saying, what he's heard, and how he feels about you dating. And really focus on that. Because that's really what's under all of this. Is it sounds like this definitely has the potential for a lot of hurt and a lot of anger to come up in your son. And it can be, if he hasn't known that you were dating before, it can be very, uh, very scary for a child to have kind of the one parent that they thought was stable all of a sudden, oh gosh, no, now mom's going to start dating, and kind of, where am I in all of this? So reassuring him and yeah, yeah, talking to him, encouraging open conversation. If he has questions about things, that that you'll talk to him. You might not be able to answer some of his questions right away, because this is kind of a complicated situation, but that you will answer them honestly, and that you might have to get back to him. Like, you might have to think of an answer, give it a day or so, and then get back to him, because you don't want to put adult problems onto him, because he's a 10-year-old kid and he's got enough stuff going on, and he doesn't need more stress in his life. So, okay, let me scroll down here. Yep. Monica says narcissists view us as their property for the rest of their life. This is why they become enraged when we move on. Yep. It's all about power and control. All about power and control, which is, it can be very confusing, because that level of reactivity in a person that's, very narcissistic, it can come across at first as, oh, they must really care. Look at how upset they are, and it can be very confusing of, what is this? Like, my ex is now married, and they have 10 kids, and now all of a sudden he or she is all up in my business and calling and threatening me, or trying to somehow out me because now I'm dating somebody. Like, what? It doesn't make any sense. It's all about power and control. So yeah. And when you see that kind of behavior, especially when you see a person who's in a scramble to maintain power and control, you basically see them revert to being a toddler. It's a toddler having a temper tantrum. And it makes pretty much no sense. It's completely irrational. It's illogical. It's emotion driven. It's um, just jaw dropping. And it really kind of shows you what you're dealing with, what the mindset is that you're dealing with. Here's a person who very clearly does not have an adaptive adult understanding of accountability, of responsibility, of effective communication, of what they have control over, what they don't have control over, what appropriate boundaries are, any of that. They're just completely, they run off of entitlement. That's it. All of the kind of higher level skills that people learn as we mature, they don't have those. They just have been getting through life through entitlement and manipulation. So, and that's a problem. Okay, let me go back to these questions here. Okay, here is one from Self-Sabotaging Sally, who says, in my journey of healing from trauma, I noticed that I block myself from taking steps to improve myself and my daily life with my family. I am a grown woman and I have a child and a husband, so now the stakes seem higher if I refuse to hold myself accountable, even on the little things. For example, I feel shame around not practicing what I preach, like sleeping in late, sleeping late, zoning out on the iPhone, poor self-care, hygiene, ignoring the routine or schedule made to support my family around meal planning, etc. It's gotten worse with the pandemic where I can just be a sloth if I want to. And I don't want to be a sloth. I want to feel good and accomplished and like I'm doing my best daily. So I feel momentum upward in life. I get frustrated because I no longer want to self sabotage with negative patterns, but I observe that I block myself and I'm wanting to stop, but there's such inertia and I keep myself tired and down. Can you offer any suggestions? It's depleting my self esteem and energy. I'm actually taking small steps, so that's good. But I think I get frustrated with myself because this is such basic stuff that it's taking me a lot of energy. But then I also recognize I've been through a lot and I've made great strides in awareness through channels like yours to be more aware. Signed, Self Sabotaging Sally. So, a couple of things. It's the vibe that I got from your letter is that you sound very overwhelmed and possibly depressed. So, when depression is present, uh, it tends to go hand in hand with a lack of motivation. It's one thing to be kind of sleeping in or sleeping late. It's another thing if we're talking poor self-care, poor hygiene. That to me shows that there's some more going on here. So, and also that disconnect between, oh man, this is the kind of person I want to be. These are the things that I want to do. I just can't seem to get going. So, when depression is present, when there's low dopamine present, dopamine is like the motivation chemical, motivation hormone. When that's not there, depression can make a person feel like they're lazy, and it can feel very shameful of what is wrong with me? Why can't I get my body in the shower? Why can't I just pull it together? This is basic stuff, right? And then we kind of start taking on this like critical parent role of, oh, what's wrong with you? Why can't you just do this? What's so hard about going to bed and getting up at the same time every day? What's so hard about taking a shower, just doing your hair or brushing your teeth? Well, if a person's struggling with depression, it's it's chemical based, and there's normal tasks of activities of daily living is what it's known as, become very, very difficult. And so that's something to think about. I would um, encourage you to examine how long have you been feeling this way. It sounds like it's been a while now since you said it's been going on, and then it's been for a while, and then it's been made worse by the pandemic. So um, what I would so outside of making a doctor's appointment and talking to your doctor about how you've been feeling, um, the other part to that is and seeing if this is potentially a uh, medication that needs to happen. Or I mean, there's other things too. If you're on medication, potentially reviewing the medications, also kind of getting your vitamin D levels checked. Um, Most people are going out significantly less because of pandemic stuff. So I would go to the doctor. I would seek if you could get a full workup on of blood work and just see what's going on. I don't know your age. It could be, perimenopause. It could be a lot of different things going on in that. Getting blood work done, uh, checking vitamin B, checking vitamin D, um, talking to your doctor about it, kind of getting the potential physical causes ruled out, and that might just be the solution right there. If that doesn't do much or move the needle, and you'll know within, if you do end up, if it's thyroid, if it's kind of whatever might be going on, getting on the right medication, you'll notice a difference in a relatively short amount of time. If you're still feeling really sluggish, there's no motivation to do much of anything, and you're feeling very overwhelmed, at a minimum, some of the thoughts that come to mind is going to be to do less. And I know that that can sound very counterintuitive, especially if you're like, God, I feel like I can't even do less than I'm doing, right? Like there's days I'm not even showering. There's days where I feel like I'm just doing the bare minimum. Think about your behavior in terms of setting yourself up for a series of small wins. Doing it that way and getting those small wins, that will help you to build momentum. So instead of doing like a 180 and tomorrow you're like, okay, guys, we have family, we're going to have family dinner. And then, you're going to, or family breakfast. And then you're going to, shower and you're going to put all this effort into your appearance and all of that. That might not be very sustainable for you. And in fact, it's kind of shown over the past year that it's not. So taking that pressure off, giving yourself compassion and grace, finding one thing for the next week that's going to be where your energy is going to go. So maybe, and think about it in terms of one thing that's going to move the needle the most. I'm going to say the uh, putting time and energy into your hygiene is gonna move the needle for you most. Getting a shower, wearing fresh clothes, brushing your teeth, um, you know, I don't know if you're a makeup person, some mascara, tinted lip gloss, liking what you see in the mirror and not feeling so schlubby every time you look in the mirror goes a long, long way. So I would start there. Just the next week, put that time into hygiene and self-care. These are acts of love. And I know it might seem like, oh, well, we should put the time into your family and mealtime and all of that. Absolutely. But start with yourself first. I guarantee you, nothing moves the needle like a good shower where you feel confident, your head is up, you're interacting with others from a place of confidence instead of a place of like invisibility and shame. Because like we talked about earlier, shame shame incapacitates people. Shame can only exist in the dark. Shame goes hand in hand with embarrassment and feeling less than and wanting to just disappear. So tomorrow morning, if it helps get you moving, realize, okay, you know what? This time for hygiene, for self-care, it doesn't have to be super long, you know, and it doesn't have to be all at once either. So if you're really running low, if you feel like you're just coasting on fumes, then step number one is to get your body in the shower. So before or after coffee doesn't make any difference to me. If you're a coffee drinker, just making that a priority. Step number one, get in the shower. Okay. And then if that's kind of all you have steam for at that time, and then okay, tell yourself before noon, I'm gonna put on makeup, whatever makes you feel um, that you're looking people in the eye when you walk out the door or when you interact with your family. Of okay, maybe a little bit of I don't know, some nice deodorant, a little bit of perfume, you're running a brush through your hair, these kinds of things. You can also, this doesn't have to, um, you can make this enjoyable, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, this hygiene time, instead of thinking of it as, oh my God, it's going to take me like an hour in the bathroom and I just don't have the time and I've got to be doing all these things and I'm just overwhelmed and I don't want to get out of bed and blah, blah, blah. Hook it to something that you enjoy. So let's say if you have a podcast or, I don't know, a Netflix show or YouTube video on a topic you like, that's a good time to listen to that, and maybe make it. And I would allow it to be something that you really enjoy, not something that's adding to your stress. So if you're the kind of person that has a bunch of like self-help kind of stuff, that can be great when we're feeling motivated, but if we're running on empty, that can kind of further, unintentionally, but further contribute to those feelings of shame and that anxiety of I should be doing more. So maybe finding something that's completely unrelated, maybe something that's funny, uh, and something that you enjoy while you're getting ready. And then the time just flies by, and then it kind of just becomes, oh, this is nice. This is my kind of coffee and getting ready time. So yeah, that's where I would start. Keep me posted if you don't mind. And I wish you all the best. Okay, so let me scroll down here. Kevin says, when the pandemic is over, I will invite everyone over to enjoy some of my Greek cooking. Hashtag my big fat Greek wedding up in the house. That sounds delightful, Kevin. Put me down for some baklava. uh, that stuff is Greek food is so delicious. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Kevin says, I have a success story to share here that I've made a major milestone. I've been able to release unforgiveness towards my narcissistic father. Could you elaborate a little more on that? That sounds like a very interesting concept. What exactly is that and what does that look like for you? Jennifer says, yeah, one of the things that my therapist noticed in me that led to depression is that I'm just not present in my own home. And I felt lazy and so tired, but I kept blaming it on my work um, because I do manual labor. It really is not just about constant sorrow all the time. I just got on Pristique a couple weeks ago and Boost Bar for intense anxiety. It's so hard, but seeing your doctor about this is a good step in the right direction. Yes, and you bring up a really great point, Jennifer, that when we see a lot of, when we think of depression and when we see um, especially kind of commercials for antidepressants, they tend to kind of frame it in a way that depression is sadness, and not everybody experiences depression as sadness. I know I don't. It's People experience it differently. They have different symptoms of it, but lethargy, um, kind of losing interest in things um, that you once cared about, like mealtime, meal planning with your family, hygiene, self-care. These are all signs. Uh, Feeling a sense of apathy. It might not be hopelessness. It might not be the feeling of, oh, nothing matters, but it might just be, I just don't care. And I don't care that I don't care. There's times I care, but for the most part, I just don't care. Just very apathetic. Like, meh, meh. I didn't shower today, so what? Didn't do this either, so what? I'll get over it. Meh. And yeah, that kind of stuff can fly under the radar for a long time as laziness or other things that it's not. But combined, all of what you're describing um, points more towards a conversation with their doctor about potential depression, for sure. So, okay, let's see. Um, well, thank you, Stargazer. Says, hi, Dana. I discovered your channel in December, and I'm so grateful for your insight. You are a calm sea. You are a calm sea in the daily storm, which is my life. Thank you. I'm. We're glad that you're here, and I'm glad that yeah, that this channel and myself and everybody here can be that for you. Yeah, you are absolutely not alone in this. It's the that daily storm that is recovering from all of this is challenging, but with time and with learning some different skills, navigating those storms becomes significantly easier. So I hope that you can kind of take comfort in knowing that. Let's see, U and A. Where did that go? UNA says, the thing that confuses me is when I think I'm past something that I've let go, the memory comes back and it hits me on my head like a mallet. Okay, so here's kind of the interesting thing about being activated like this. So when we're having a really intense emotional um, response to a situation, present or past, like a memory or something that's currently happening, it's a sign that we're being activated. And generally, the more kind of the more activated we are, the deeper the wound is. So if we think we're kind of we've moved past something, um, but then we kind of find out like something happens, we become activated in some way, shape, or form, and now we're doing what Brene Brown refers to as chandeliering, which I think is a great term. So basically being so activated that you kind of like a cartoon character who gets I don't know, upset, or he gets kind of stuck in the bum with a needle, and he just yow, and he jumps straight up and hangs onto the chandelier. So that's chandeliering. It's when we become so activated that we just go from 0 to 10, and next thing we know, we're kind of hanging on that chandelier. So um, it's a sign that there's still unprocessed hurt there. And one of the ways that we can work through it, there's a couple of things that we can do. So we can examine we can examine, and I would encourage you to do this, how are you currently perceiving this past situation? Because it's really wild how the power and the shift of seeing things through that wounded child lens, and then seeing things through maybe a wounded but yet adaptive adult lens. So that wounded child lens is there tends to be a lot of fear there's a lot of internalization going on of, oh, I am bad, I am wrong, um, I need, uh, I want other people to like me, or I am responsible for the feelings of others, or I'm just responsible for others in general, or I'm not enough, that there's something wrong with me. So those wounded child responses tend to be really wrapped around our identity, and they tend to shape our identity too. But they tend to be closer to the core of who we are. The And we can tell when we're in that adaptive adult response, when we're perceiving maybe that same situation, but we're not internalizing it. We're able to kind of externalize it and realize, okay, this is a reflection of that person. So let's say, for example, you had a teacher who absolutely was horrific to you and berated and belittled and shamed and embarrassed you in front of the whole class. And as maybe an 8-year-old, you internalized that and thought, oh, I'm somehow not enough. Like there's something profoundly wrong with me. I'm not likable. I am not, um, I somehow deserve this. Um, I'm not as good as the other kids. But the um, adaptive adult response, we might have hurt feelings about this. Like, oh my gosh, that teacher was such a witch. I can't believe she would do that. But we're letting her behavior be a reflection of her, not a reflection of us. So even if we did something really naughty in school, let's say we were cheating, or we put, I don't know, gum on the teacher's chair. There's still that line of what response an appropriate response is. Right? So shaming, belittling, threatening, humiliating a child for something like that is still not okay. And okay, so I guess the first step in that is to examine, am I internalizing this this event from the past, or am I able to externalize it? Am I seeing it from this wounded child response, or is it an adaptive adult response? If it's the wounded child response, it helps tremendously, first of all, to realize, oh, there's another way that I can perceive the situation. That tends to clear up a lot of that hurt and pain almost instantly. Uh, the added part to that, which um, I love these two things together. I think they're just such a powerful combination, is to then think back to that time, whatever that situation might be. And um, when you are hurting, or you're sad, or uh, you're angry, or whatever, and then as your your adaptive adult self going back, even if the situation happened last week, okay, right? Because you're a different person today than you were last week. So going back to your former self at whatever age you might have been, again, it could be just simply last week, and giving yourself the validation, the reassurance, the comfort that you needed at that time. And sometimes that is incredibly helpful, especially for if it's that wounded child self going back, and that scared little kid who felt so awful about themselves, and was walking home slowly, and everybody else is pointing and laughing, and they just feel so hurt and so all alone. Visualizing yourself, you know, going up to them, or kneeling down beside them and just saying, "You know what, honey? Like, I am so sorry that the way that teacher treated you, it wasn't right, it wasn't fair, it wasn't okay. You did not deserve that. And I just want you to know, like, I hear you, and I see you, and I see your hurt, and I see your anger. And it is so understandable as to why you would feel that way. And I am your adult self, and I am here to protect you. And, um, you know, we don't have to, as an adult now, we don't have to endure situations like this anymore, that we can leave, that I know how to protect us now, that you don't have to just sit there and take it anymore. We have options. And so, kind of connecting both of those parts of yourself can be very, very, very healing. Um, Lori says, I love this approach with my wounded child. Yeah, it's amazing the stuff that comes up because, again, the way that, well, the power in this is that it really releases so much of the hold of the hurt from our past, especially childhood, but the hurt from our past. It's giving ourselves that grace and compassion and that validation and um, that reassurance. It's so powerful. And it's also very interesting when we start exploring these different situations and realizing, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize that that was how I had internalized that situation. And more often than not, because if something happened to you that was traumatic, uh, I don't know, was when you were young, you're going to perceive it. The messages that you're going to tell yourself about that situation are very different than what you're going to tell yourself when you're 16 or when you're 26 or when you're 46 or 96. So it's helpful to go back and to realize, okay, what messages was I telling myself? And odds are, as a child, uh, there's a very solid chance that it was more kind of limiting, and coming from a place of powerlessness, because that's all a child knows. Kids don't kind of step into their power really until they're able to say no and actually have consequences and do their own thing, like make decisions and do their own thing. And I think for many of us in my generation or older, that didn't happen until we moved out. So, like, thankfully that kind of up and coming generations, that's happening sooner and sooner, where they're able to have more say, which I think is wonderful. I came across, somebody was talking to me the other day about some like a body autonomy class that was going to be happening in their elementary school once it reopened. And basically about saying kind of, the different like good touch, bad touch, that you have the right to say no. And it's just because somebody's a relative or that a family friend doesn't mean that you need to go sit on their lap or snuggle up to them or um, to feel uncomfortable, that it's your body and it's your space, and that it's okay to say no, and that other people need to respect that. And if somebody's doing something to make you feel uncomfortable, to share that with a trusted adult. And I love that. So, okay, let's see. Um, I'm scrolling. Lori says, I just realized I've been depressed pretty bad at some points in life where I just didn't care. Thank you for all you do. Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, that's the thing, man, with depression is it can just kind of settle in like a slow moving fog. And for some people that really struggle with it, that fog can take a while to lift. And it can be very confusing and very shame based. So real and frankly, anybody that's listening to this, if you've been feeling that way, so like something's off, you just can't get going, very lethargic, very kind of apathetic, kind of your normal activities of daily living seem just like this monumental task, or like you're walking around wearing uh, like a lead jacket, like everything just feels heavy and it requires so much energy and um, motivation to just do simple things. That's worth a doctor's visit. So at a minimum, getting some blood work checked, because that's not normal. So okay, Jen asks, how do we get through the fight, flight, or freeze, the constant survival mode? Okay. uh, it's kind of a big question. So it's going to depend on the person and their situation. So um, it's going to depend on the person and their situation. I'm trying to give you a more tailored answer than just that. It's going to depend on if they're still experiencing a traumatic or anxiety inducing situation, or if that situation's been kind of long gone. If they're still in an anxiety inducing situation, then that fight, flight, or freeze response is still it's appropriate. So if we're still living in abuse or working in an abusive job, or our boss is abusive, a coworker is abusive, whatever it might be, um, you know, then yeah, that's still going to be there. And the reality is that the fight, flight, or freeze response, it's there to protect us. So inherently, it's not that response, those survival responses aren't a problem. It's the degree and frequency that we experience them that are the problem. So if we're finding ourselves um, kind of doing that chandeliering, becoming very activated, very emotionally reactive, which tends, um, the kind of anger and hurt can be a blurred line sometimes. So that might be kind of that fight response. Or if we're finding ourselves getting incredibly defensive over uh, in a way that's disproportionate to what's currently going on, that's one of the ways that fight response can surface. Um, the uh, let's see, the flee, well, fight, yeah. So the flight response might be avoiding things, procrastination, leaving the room, just withdrawing in general. The freeze response might be where we just can't think of what to say. So somebody does something and we're kind of left with our mouth hanging open. Like, I don't know what to say to that. We're just shocked. So, and here's the thing, we all have our default response. And the added thing to that is we don't really get to choose. Our brain chooses for us. So our brain has its primary preferred way of handling stress. And it's really helpful if you know this about yourself, because every person's different. Some people, it's situational too, where they might go into fight mode in one situation, but then um, in other times they might go into freeze mode. So we all tend to have like a primary one and then a secondary one. Pete Walker in his book, I think it was the CPTSD book, From Surviving to Thriving. Fantastic, fantastic book. He has the added, um, he calls it the 4 Fs, the added defense of what he calls fawn, or which is basically friend. So becoming friends, it's using niceness or ingratiating ourselves as a way of handling stress. So let's say, for example, we have a bully at work. Um, And if that's our defense, is that fawn or that friend response, then we might become very uh, eager to please them, very ingratiating, as a way of trying to keep the peace and to prevent being a target. Um, so yeah, I guess getting clear on what your uh, kind of primary and secondary responses are is a huge step in the right direction. Um, then getting clear on what kind of environment you're currently in. So, and reducing stress as much as you can across the board, and then really working on assertiveness skills. So the kind of the middle ground, actually I should say the kind of, well, in terms of like interpersonal relationships, uh, the way out of that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn type responses, it's assertiveness. That's incredibly difficult for a lot of people. Assertiveness isn't really taught, and it's not really role modeled, even by people that claim to value effective communication and all of it. It's difficult to do. So um, it takes time and it takes practice. One of the things that we can ask ourselves is, in terms of interpersonal relationships, if we're avoiding being assertive, asking ourselves, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? That can really get to the root of that avoidance, especially if, well, that's if there's the flight, freeze, or fawn response. What are you afraid of? The core of that fight response tends to be um, it's feeling boundaries are crossed. Which boundary do you feel is being crossed? What are you finding so activating, and getting clear about that. So the fight response, when it's channeled effectively into effective communication, that fight response, that anger in that fight response softens to assertiveness. It's The anger gets us moving. It kind of lights a fire under us. It gets us moving to take some sort of self-protective action. That assertiveness moderates our behavior to where we don't come out attacking and or chandeliering or any of that. But again, this is very, very difficult to do if we're in a deeply dysfunctional environment, or, um, currently being abused, these kinds of things. So that's what I was kind of getting at when I was saying it just depends on the person and their situation. Um, Rafe asks, what's with the over the top? Wait, what is with the overly wild, over the top sexual behavior? With, well, it depends. I guess it's different for different people. Um, with kind of narcissists, it's a lot of times sex is a weapon. They know that they can lure people in with it. They know that they can um, kind of trap people with it. They know that it can be very addictive. Uh, on their end, when a person has a very limited emotional range, then they tend to seek out um, kind of emotionally charged experiences in order to feel alive. So sex is one of those. the cheating, lying, stealing. Oftentimes it's the thrill. It's the thrill of it. It's the thrill of what can they get away with, of it makes them, and if they do get away with it, it makes them feel powerful. Uh, you have people that kind of fall more into that camp of like um, narcissism. Let me back up. Narcissism in itself, it's a human trait. Okay, but and it's on a scale ranging from what would be considered healthy to what would be considered deeply like pathological behavior, and then I'd say like malignant, so like deadly, dangerous, and lots of things exist in between that. So um, when a person has hypersexuality, it could be any number of things. It could be if it's their way to get their um, ego fed. It's their way to kind of feel like enough. It's their way. For some people, it's how the only way that they really know how to have a relationship. For some people, it can be a trauma response, um, where it's their way. They were um, um, sexually assaulted or sexually abused, and uh, now at this point in their life, that as a way to feel more in control, then they've become they've can kind of continue to create these situations where they feel in control over their body and over sex. um, you know there's just lots of different things. I think if we're talking about just kind of the run-of-the-mill narcissist, it's uh, they like that adoration. They like being told, "Oh, you're so beautiful. Oh, you're so amazing. You're so, um, you know, fantastic in bed or whatever." So, but yeah, and some people, it's kind of those that are more like on that histrionic side of the spectrum. That's how they get kind of their self-esteem needs met. Yeah, probably Anna Nicole Smith would, or even Marilyn Monroe, probably good examples of this. Anna Nicole Smith, I think especially, it's that feeling of I've got to be so sexual, so over the top, so kind of on all of the time. It's this performance, this larger than life personality in order uh, to be seen. And if I'm not this bombshell, then I'm invisible. So kind of very extremes with how they see themselves, how they see their self-worth. A lot of times it's very um, that it's that external locus of control, that external locus of evaluation. I guess more so that of looking for that external validation is more of what it is. Maybe not so much external locus of control, but it's that validation's coming from outside of themselves. So they need other people to see them, to be like, oh, you're this, you're that. To other people kind of define them, they build them up. Especially that, a lot of narcissists have very paper thin egos, and they can't handle criticism. They can't handle like kind of losing power and control. They can't handle uh, feeling second best. So yeah, it's a problem. Thank you. Proud Mama 2 says, Dana, mahalo for all that you give to those who are trying to find their way. Oh, well, thank you. And I appreciate you guys too. All the support and the awesomeness that goes on in the chat is just really cool. Let's see here. Let me scroll. Scrolling. Okay, Lori, and I kind of missing what this is in response to, but Lori was saying, I was never validated by my parents. I was a rebel. Yeah. And so that kind of that rebel is, it's more of that avoidant style, right? It's like, I don't need this. I don't need you. I don't care what you think. I don't care what you want. I'm out of here, kind of a thing. And that that can be a very real response to pain. So if we're not feeling, if we're if there's that disconnection with parents, if a child is feeling very disconnected from their family, um, and because that's the thing, like if connection is so important, if that connection isn't present, then any correction that the parents or authority figures do is just going to feel like abuse. It's going to feel like punishment. So correction is really only effective if that connection is there. So it's kind of why I try to really hammer home that point of connection, connecting with a child in a way that they want to connect, not in a way that we want to connect, but in a way that they want to connect. Spending time, getting to finding out how are they, what's going on with them, how's school, how are their friends, what are their interests, taking some time to 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 connect with them in a way that is engaging for them. There's all kinds of different like tabletop, simple games, like self-awareness question type games, that are kind of fun to do. I got a set from my niece and nephew that I like to do whenever I see them. And you're sitting there, you're waiting for dinner, what you something in the oven, you're having breakfast in the morning, and they like to do it too. Like they'll pull out a few cards, we'll go through a few questions, and it's all kinds of just randomness. Like, well, what kind of superhero would you want to be? Or what kind of superpower would you want to have and why? Or, if you had $1 million, what would you do with it? Um, or what's one of your biggest strengths? Or what's your favorite food? Like these kinds of things, like really kind of getting to know each other and feeling seen, feeling validated is so important for kids. Because once that, and that's the way around that avoidance. Unfortunately, um, a lot of that avoidance comes from hurt. It's that feeling of my parents don't care, they're too busy, uh, they've moved on with their own life. Uh, they just, or if our only interactions with them is punishment, like we're getting grounded nonstop, or they're just complaining about who we are, what we're doing, then that wall is going to go up. And the only way for that to come down is for connection to start happening, which it can be very difficult because at that point, a child gets to a certain age where they're really not interested in that anymore. So taking the time to really nurture those connections and showing a child that you care in small ways, it makes a big difference. So okay, let me. Let's see. I agree. Thank you, Embers. I was thinking about that when I said that and was like, I need to come up with a different word. She said, Dana, I respectfully recommend using the B word instead of the W word for a bad person. I am a witch, and thousands, if not millions of us were tortured, burned, raped, and killed. Thank you. Yes, I agree. That is something that I need to get out of my vocabulary. Yeah, I'll have to come up with another word. Um, I'll have to come up with something. But yeah, you're right. And thank you for mentioning it. If it slips again, if I slip again with it, please bring it up again, because that is something that I would like to change. AB says, how can you just get over that feeling? Like, WTF, why were they so mean? Well, again, it, I think a lot of it comes with realizing that it's a reflection of their limitations. It's not a reflection of you or other people. It's sort of like, why are people with Alzheimer's so forgetful, right? Or why why are people with diabetes so sensitive to carbohydrates? You know, why can't people with diabetes just loosen up and just, eat fruit or like eat sugar? Or why can't uh, this woman with Alzheimer's, gosh, why can't she just pull herself together and make sure she, uh, eats every day, or remembers? Why can't my mother that has Alzheimer's remember my children's names? When we put it that way, we realize, okay, that's not an appropriate request, because these are the limitations of this person. And everybody has their own strengths and their own weaknesses. Everybody has limitations. And realizing that some people, they're just mean. And it's a sign of emotional immaturity. It's probably a sign of trauma, unprocessed trauma from a long time ago. At a minimum, it's a sign of a deeply dysfunctional mindset. Um, there's a lot going on there, but it didn't start with you, and it's not going to end with you. Like, this is just who they are for a multitude of reasons. And I think kind of seeing it that way, realizing that it didn't start with you and it's not going to end with you, and that had it not been you, it just would have been somebody else. So even though it was deeply personal at the time, it's kind of not. It's whoever's in their path at a certain time is going to bear the brunt of their wrath. So it's their limitation. Um, Huffle Mom says, Dana, I like to use the word bench. So as far as I know, there are no benches that are likely to be offended by the reference. That's cute. That's cute. Bench. I'll have to think about that. I like the direction you're heading, though. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. You know, um, AB2 with how do you letting go, kind of, yeah, moving past their meanness. So like we were just talking about, kind of realizing, okay, this is, you just happen to get caught up in their limitations. And then the next wave of this, which I think is important to discuss because uh, it often isn't, and it can kind of feel like a stumbling into a pothole, is if we stayed in a relationship with a person who really mistreated us, whether it was a friendship or a relationship or at a job or whatever. Then when we realize, oh my gosh, this was this person's limitation, I just didn't see it before because I was going through life thinking that we were kind of like at the core that we were all the same, that everybody had about the same level of emotional maturity. We all had the same morals and motivations, kind of same wants and needs. And now I realize that that's not correct. And um, there can be a lot of feelings of sadness. Um, Sadness kind of across the board, sadness for time lost, sadness for staying in a situation where we were so horrifically mistreated, sadness at thinking that that situation was even in the same zip code as love or friendship. Um, yeah, sadness that we just endured, that we felt the need to sit there and endure it and hope that that person would change. So there's a lot of that kind of tends to be the next wave that comes up after this of, oh my gosh. And then people oftentimes will be like, well, what was so wrong with me? That I stayed. Oh my gosh, what was so wrong with me? And again, a lot of it has to do with just dysfunctional messages that we've all picked up along the way. The um, the the one I was just mentioning, the kind of this idea that we're all inherently about the same, and because of that, that all issues tend to inherently have the same solution. So if we're not getting along with another person, well, then the solution is going to be communication. I think that's what we're all pretty much taught, right? Like, and we've been talking about it tonight too, I guess, in all fairness, like assertiveness, kind of setting boundaries, these kinds of things. That's all fine and well, if you're dealing with a team oriented person. If you're dealing with an abusive or domination driven person, communication not the issue. The issue is their level of narcissism. The issue is their level of is their mindset, their win-lose mindset of um, it's they're not team oriented. And so a lot of people, um, if we have that roadmap of, okay, this is how I go about a relationship. I just am going to communicate and I'm going to stick around because friendship is forever, or, marriages take work, or commitments forever. I've got all these different messages that are driving my behavior. So I'm going to stick around and I'm going to really double down or triple up on my communication and really try to make things work. Well, that's what taking 100% of the responsibility of the relationship looks like. And that doesn't work. That'll just burn a person out. So kind of realizing that learning how to communicate more effectively with um, that not everybody's the same, not everybody has the same morals, motivations, or maturity, or desire, willingness or desire for a relationship, or depth of attachment. I mean, we differ in so many ways, and so kind of realizing that these differences are present is it's vital. It's vital to kind of understanding the ourselves and other people in this world and how we interact with them, and then interacting with them accordingly, whatever that might look like. So, okay. Let me go back here. Let me make sure I answered these questions. I know I have one. Okay. I just have one more. Um, this is Dear Dana. I live with and nearby dysfunctional aging family, and I'm aiming to move out ASAP as I feel like I cannot breathe or be myself or even take care of myself around them. It's like they're my kryptonite, and getting my basic needs met feels hard, and I'm on edge and anxious and sleeping odd hours all the time. Meanwhile, I have little to no desire to reach out to them, but I still maintain minimal contact for the sake of my child, and because I have to, on a practical level, to get my mail from my dismissive sister or check in on my aging parents. Engaging in any form right now makes me feel like I'm betraying my own boundaries of what I will and will not allow, both for myself and my child and husband. And also, my own inner child feels frozen, traumatized, and stuck in old patterns. I have so much unresolved pain around their treatment of me, and I can't even make space to process that as the pandemic has me with little privacy. I get constantly triggered from past memories of abusive, narcissistic behavior. And even now, with benign things like them not responding at all to cute photos of my child that I text them on occasion, or bypassing me from my child when they do feel like engaging with her on rare occasions. It's hard because I feel alone and abandoned, and like conditional love was all I got. I also constantly try to figure out who's the main wizard and who are the flying monkeys in my scenario to protect myself. How can I uphold boundaries in such a frustrating situation to have some way to return to myself? The saddest thing is being incapable to care for myself well, even though I previously could. Also, I feel so uncentered and constantly triggered by my child. She can cross boundaries like no one's business. And now that I homeschool due to pandemic, we spend way too much time together as a family. I also question her motives, as she's a clever, strong willed young child and quite needy and often manipulative to get what she wants, which leaves me exhausted and confused a lot, and it triggers my trauma. And I know I need to be a strong parent for her in a healthy, grounded way, but I feel taken advantage of when she crosses boundaries. I'm sorry this is so long. I'm signed, numbed out, and unable to breathe. So, okay, a couple of things here. Let's kind of work backwards with your child. Yes, you're right. And this is kind of, well, this is how young children go about getting their needs met. They are manipulative and they're really good at it. They cry, they pout, they threaten, they can withhold love or attention. They might not look at you. Um, they're say, I'm going to hold my breath until you do what I want. They pitch a fit. They do all kinds of things. And that's in an age appropriate way of them getting their needs met. So I can yes, that absolutely it's exhausting, and it makes complete sense as to why it would leave you feeling confused and triggered, especially if you've experienced this kind of behavior uh, from previous abuse and from another very manipulative person. So the added part to that is with kids, kind of their job is to explore boundaries. So that's part of what they're doing all this. They're trying to figure out what the world is and what the world isn't, what mom is and what mom isn't, what is safe, what is unsafe, what is kind of what are things. And we all do this. We learn by contrast. It's that sifting and sorting. It's a thing is this and it's not this. And then as we get older, we have more information that expands our worldview. So, for example, a child, if you have, let's say, a Labrador as a dog, a child learns, okay, this dog is black lab. Okay. And that's they just when they think of a dog, that's what they think of. Well, then maybe a couple of years down the road, they go to a friend's house who has I don't know, little white and tan Chihuahua, completely different looking dog. And they're kind of, wow, I didn't realize that dogs could be so small or look so different or be so loud. Right. So they're they're sifting and sorting, and they're adding information to their worldview, and that's part of it. As adults, yes, it can get very draining of the continual questions and the manipulation and the the pushing boundaries, wanting to know why, wanting to, especially when they get to certain ages, wanting them saying no, them, um, there's just all this just uphill, right? Look at all this resistance all the time. But that's part of it. That's kind of their job as a child. And if we're doing things right, that's what they'll continue to do is to ask questions and explore, and it's trial and error, and they'll stumble and they'll fall and they'll make mistakes and all of that, and that's their job, to push boundaries and to learn. And our job as a parent is to hold boundaries. So you can see by nature, this is a tense relationship. So, in kind of the middle ground there, it's staying connected as much as you possibly can with that child. And when there is punishment given, it's coming from a place of love and not anger, which can be very difficult, especially in your kind of situation where, how did you sign it? You signed it's numbed out and unable to breathe. So if you're already at that place where your anxiety is here, if you're up, it's up to your eyebrows in anxiety and stress, and that you're having a hard time just even breathing, um, parenting a young child on top of that, I can, yeah, absolutely. Um, that sounds incredibly stressful. So so moving forward, your idea of moving out as soon as you possibly can, I think, is a fantastic one, as having your own space is going to help give you some breathing room. It's you'll be able to create more of your own peaceful place instead of being um, being in a very stressful house and trying to heal from trauma and have a small child and pandemic and homeschool and so yes, getting into your own space is a good step. So until then, I would encourage you to find some ways to carve out some peace in your life, so to bring that level of stress down from a 10. It sounds like you're at a 10. Like if you're numbed out and unable to breathe, that sounds like you're close to kind of that breaking point. So bringing down that stress level as much as you can, as often as you can. If this, and this might mean um, taking time um, to take baths, maybe not even take baths, to lock the bathroom door when your child is taking a nap, and just to read a book or to watch YouTube videos with your headphones in. So just creating some space that's your own. You don't need to tell people that's what you're doing. Tell them that you're going to go take a bath. Tell them that you're whatever. But most time people, that's one boundary that tends to be a lot easier to kind of hold, assuming that you have more than one bathroom in your house. If you only have one bathroom, then let's talk. But that can help. Or going for a drive. It doesn't even have to be a long drive. It could be just around the corner to where nobody can see you, and sitting in your car, just getting to 10, 15, 20 minutes, um, just decompressing can do wonders. Um, being very intentional about what you're feeding your brain at this point when your anxiety is so high. So, kind of bringing some awareness to what you are watching on YouTube or podcasts that you're listening to or Netflix series that you're watching, and noticing how you feel afterwards. Are you feeling kind of refreshed or relaxed, or are you feeling more stressed? Are you feeling anxious? Like, for example, for most people, watching the news tends to raise their anxiety. So, comedy, kind of one of my, for example, one of my favorite kind of more, I don't want to say brainless, um, mindless, just kind of pure entertainment. We'll put it that way. Pure entertainment channels. There's a great channel called Cinema Sins, and they just point out things that are wrong in movies. It's just silly. There's no there's no deep emotional investment. It's not heavy topics. Uh, it's just pure entertainment, that kind of stuff. Things that make you laugh, things that feel lighthearted. Being very intentional about that. That's some excellent self care. Um, if boundaries really aren't a thing that you can necessarily do in this house, then kind of realizing, okay, this is just these limitations, but trying to set some boundaries around creating your own space to the ability that you can is going to be huge, huge. There's also uh, like guided meditations here on YouTube. Jason Seeley is fantastic. Oh, what's his name? No, Michael. Yeah, Michael Seeley and Jason Stevenson, both fantastic. And um, yeah, turning something like that on at night, that might even be something that you would consider listening to with your child, with your daughter, when you guys are going to bed at night. It kind of helps to role model for her how to calm down, how to be still. So it kind of role models some positive skills for her, and getting finding some support. So um, expanding your social support, whether that's going to be online, whether that's reconnecting with some old friends, whether whatever that might be. I would strongly encourage you to consider doing that. Okay, so let me scroll down here. Oh, yeah. Jack was saying that Helpful Mom used to love Cinema Sins, but then she got tired of the negativity and moved to a different channel called Cinema Wins. Yeah, that channel is cute too. I think I think it's the same people. I'm not 100%, but yeah. Yeah, it's cute. I just it cracks me up how much the guy gets worked up in in Cinema Sins about little things and the details that he catches. Jack asked, Dana, did you have an interview with Michael Seeley or was that Lisa Colucci? That was not me. I should interview him. I would love that. I've been a big fan of his work for a long time. He, I believe, is also big into hypnotherapy, which is very interesting. Okay, let me scroll. Kayla is here. Welcome, Kayla. Um, let's see. Let me scroll. A baby giraffe says, just wanted to say you helped me through a lot when I left an insane relationship. My ex had completely lied about his entire past. I had no idea who he even was. He made a fake obituary for an ex he never had. Just thank you for what you do. Oh my gosh. Yes, you are so very welcome. That has a lot of tones to the situation I was in. Yeah, it's um, shocking. The level, the depth that uh, some people lie, and that they can just fake a whole life, a whole relationship. It's terrifying and overwhelming, and I'm glad that you found your way here, and I hope that you're getting some of the clarity and validation and healing that you're looking for. Jack mentions, he's talking to Bonnie, but he says, I don't want to reopen Dana's grief. He says, do you remember when she was caring for her dying father? He says, my father is dying now too. And Jack, I wanted to add, I did get your message. I saw it like right before I went live. Uh, it's it's okay. It's okay. Uh, so you can absolutely, if you need some support around what you're going through with your dad and um, all of that, then yes, this is, it's okay to be sad, and grief is a process. And, uh, my grief over losing my dad, it comes in waves. And I frankly, I think it took me probably a full year before it really kind of hit me that he had died. So it was just a lot. But uh, yeah, I think grief grief is grief, and it's part of it, right? It's part of this whole human process, this whole journey through life, and um, it brings up a wide mix of emotions. So yeah, UNA says, yeah, that has to be scary. The family dynamic will change. That's such a hard time. Jack was saying, yeah, my dad's under the mistaken impression that he lives because he will hold his family together that way. But no, the toxic relationships are crumbling. There's, I don't know if there's any more significant or stressful time in a family than when a significant member of that family is dying, because it truly is. It's this great reshuffling that goes on. It's roles that people might not have even been aware that they played or that they were assigned or any of it. And stress tends to run at an all-time high. And it can absolutely bring out both the best and the worst in people. So what I would encourage you to do is kind of know that, I guess, first and foremost, and uh, talk to Huffle Mom about that, and kind of make the declaration now of get clear on how you want to handle this process. Don't wait, and don't wait for like your kind of the default ways that you handle stress to kick in for it to be handled. Decide ahead of time. That was one of the biggest uh, kind of lessons, and it's one of the things that I think we did right as a family, um, that happened as a result of intense amounts of stress. And I'm so glad that we kind of all had this realization pretty early on, because it was a huge turning point. I think there would have been a lot of like complete breakdowns had there not been that agreement. So one of the things that we decided was uh, that we needed to work as a team, and we were all feeling very divided. We were exhausted. It was just a lot, that we all needed to work as a team, and that we were going to communicate directly with each other. Again, granted, this only works if you have people that are able to do that. But if you and Huffle Mom are able to be a team, having these conversations and anticipating it's going to be difficult, it's going to be stressful, it's going to be sad. There's going to be hurt and anger and all kinds of things that surface. And so maybe making it a point to check in with each other, um, at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, or both. Um, Having some sort of um, time of connection or ability to kind of get your head in the game. So my family, even though I'm not religious, um, we all decided that we were going to have like a prayer circle in the morning, and that helped, and it helped tremendously just to get on the same page of, okay, this is our goal, these are the kind of, we're praying for strength, we're praying for courage, we're praying for um, you know to kind of just be a support to each other, and for reminding ourselves of that every single morning was very, very, very helpful. So oftentimes too, hospice, if he's on hospice, which I would assume that he is, they have they might have like a chaplain or a social worker that can meet with the family. So that might be worth giving them a call and seeing if you can connect with them sooner than later. Yeah. Huffle mom was saying to Auntie and I think I had similar problems when my dad died. For over a year, I wasn't even able to cry. Yeah. It just, the emotions that come up like waves. And um, yeah, it's intense. It's intense. And JJ says, without grief, we wouldn't know what joy was. Yeah. Yeah. And grief is, um, it's a sign of connection. And mm, I don't, there's so many different emotions that can come up with that because there's such a finality with death, even though. But although, with that said, like even though the physical relationship is no longer present, there's still that emotional relationship that continues. So um, it just, the relationship changes. It's not gone. Oh, well, thank you. Monica says, thank you, Dana. And I love your new painting. Thank you. Well, you know what, Monica, this is probably, thank you for the super chat. Thank you for the kind words. Probably a good time for me to explain this painting. I don't really know if I have um, yet. So, this painting was inspired uh, by kind of that well, it looks like stained glass. That wasn't how it was going to start off, but that's what it ended up being. It was inspired by that concept of that kintsugi, the repairing things with gold, the Japanese concept of repairing generally ceramic, but kind of broken objects with gold, and that each object, has kind of breaks in its own way, and it's put together in its own way, and it's made stronger when it's repaired. And I just thought that was a very good metaphor for healing, for people, for us. And um, yeah, yeah, life isn't fair, but it's still good. And we don't, life involves trauma, and life involves pain, and that's all part of it. Um, but we ultimately get to decide how we put the pieces back together again. And that's kind of the beauty in all of this. And that's where that thriving comes into play, because we don't, it's sort of like, I forget who said it, but these events, they don't have to destroy us. Like, we can let them reveal us. And a lot of that starts with early on deciding how we're going to handle pain and trauma in our life. It's significantly easier if we kind of make up our mind ahead of time of how we're going to handle something, instead of having something happen and then, uh, just kind of getting dragged along behind it. So that's a very, that was a very powerful shift for me, realizing that I didn't have to wait uh, to see how I was going to end up, or I didn't have to, things, just because something really traumatic happened to me, that doesn't mean that has to define me, or that has to limit me, or um, reduce me, or anything. That I get to decide how I define myself. I get to decide what this means to my life, and I get to decide how I'm going to use experiences in my life. And I decided that I'm going to use them for my highest and greatest good. And then in time, I'll use them for the highest and greatest good of others. Because that's the only thing that makes sense to me. So once I had that direction, it made the storms of life a lot easier to to navigate, because it was like having that North Star of, okay, well, yeah, this is incredibly painful. I'm feeling very overwhelmed and all of this is going on, but at least I know the direction that I'm heading. Whereas before I had that clarity, I was all over the place emotionally. It's like, I don't know if I'm okay, I'm not okay, I'm suicidal, I'm not suicidal, I'm this, I'm that. Just all over the place. And it's like, nope, okay, this is the direction. This is the only direction that I'm heading. Everything else is off the table. Then it was, um, yeah, it helped. It really helped with the storms of life. So, um, let's see here. Let me scroll up. Mm, thank you, Puffle Mom, for mentioning that. She was saying that you can text me your question too. Yes. So if you have a question that you would like discussed, I guess, in a live stream, you can email it to me at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com. If you want to be notified when I go live, you can send a text. You can text the words Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. And if you would like some words of encouragement, I send them out, I don't know, 3 to 4 times a week. Uh, you can text the words I thrive, all one word, to the number 22999 and get on that list. And of course, you can unsubscribe at any time. There's no cost or anything to it. The only thing to consider is just data charges for your phone plan. So, okay, let me scroll down here. Oh, it's wonderful. Faith says, Dana, that saved me too. I took your decision for my own to not let it destroy my life and to use it for my highest and greatest good of myself and for others. That's awesome. That's awesome. How did it feel when you made that shift? Okay, so let me scroll up here. Right. UNA says, yeah, it's sort of like a healed, broken bone is stronger than an unbroken one. Yep, absolutely. Let's see. Let me scroll. Huffle Mom says, I have to go. If I don't go now, I won't get my evening walk in, and I keep putting it off. We absolutely understand. I'll have a wonderful walk, and yeah, I'll see you next week. Jennifer, she's talking to Huffle Mom. She says, will treating the inner child as a separate entity like this cause me to develop dissociative identity disorder? Or is DID something that's genetic, predisposed, or chemical? So here's the no, I guess, and your short answer is no, it won't cause you to develop DID. So um, the reality is we all have different selves. We just don't normally think of them like that. So it can feel a little weird at first, sort of like, gosh, am I, is, especially if a person is familiar with disassociation or DID or things like this, it can feel like, oh, am I fragmenting? Is this a problem? And, the reality is it's not. So we all have this, we all have like kind of a wise self, or we have a protective self, or we have the inner child. self, or like the wounded inner child, or the adaptive adult self. So these are all parts of us, um, and I think a part of becoming fully integrated starts with kind of identifying those different selves and acknowledging them, and kind of seeing our behavior through the lens of those different selves, especially that wounded child self of, oh, this is this is kind of what's been driving certain behavior. It's that wounded child self. Or when we're handling things, and we know when we're handling things like an adaptive adult, it's like, okay, this is that adaptive adult that's taken control. So that, that wounded child tends to have a very, like we were talking about earlier, a very kind of um, internalized response to things. Um, I'm bad. I'm not enough. Um, it's kind of this all or nothing thinking, like I'm responsible for other people's feelings. Um, it's not okay for me to get angry. I want everybody must like me. Um, I need the approval of others. I can't protect myself. Uh, it's not okay for me to question authority. Like those kinds of responses that are fear based, that are feeling like there's something profoundly wrong with us. Um, kind of those extreme responses. That's that wounded child. And so kind of bringing those responses to light, and then asking ourselves some questions, or coming up with like, well, what would be a more adaptive adult response to this? Or having your like, for example, if the message that we've been carrying around is um, let me try to think of something, like it's not okay for me to question authority, then the adaptive adult response might be something along the lines of, uh, it is okay for me to ask questions when I need clarity. Like, or asking questions is something that some asking questions or getting clarity is, um, it's appropriate. And, like with your situation, Jennifer, with your doctor, if there's kind of fear there of, oh, I'm intimidated by this doctor, kind of realizing, I have options. I'm paying this person. Like, so, um, that w- I'm not here as a child. I'm here as an adult who has questions, who's trying to advocate for their health. And um, I have the very reasonable expectation that I will be treated like an adult, and with dignity and respect, and that I will be listened to. My hope is that my doctor is professional enough to do that. And if he or she is not, then I will find somebody else. Like, I'm not going to go to professionals that are incompetent, or that are dismissive, or that, that aren't giving, that aren't able to contribute to me getting the results that I'm looking for. So, yeah. So sometimes just kind of making those shifts in your mind can be tremendously helpful. Monica asks, well, real quick, Jennifer asks, I ask because I do disassociate a fair bit. My mom is the same way. We go inward and get immersed in the internet. And disassociation, like everything else, it's on a spectrum, right? Ranging from mild to severe. And it's the degree and frequency of it is when it becomes a problem. So if we're disassociating kind of every single time that we're experiencing something stressful, then that's worth exploring. There's something going on there. There's something that we're not wanting to think about or to feel. Um, on the more mild end, we all do it. We get bored. We disassociate. We had a hard day at work. We go binge watch Netflix. You know, if it's every now and again, it's okay. But again, if we're using it as a way of kind of self-soothing, and if it's our only way of self-soothing, then that's worth exploring some alternatives. But like I said, we all disassociate. It's not a bad thing. It's degree and frequency. That's the issue. Monica. Okay, so Monica asked, do they ever truly give up? Um, it's hard to say because they're all different. I I guess I would anticipate. I would just kind of to spare yourself the brain energy of trying to figure out their behavior or whatever. I would just assume that no, they're not going to give up, and then plan accordingly. So, um, because spending all of that energy kind of waffling of will this person leave me alone? Will they not? Is this time for good? Is this just err on the side of caution? Nope, they're never going to give up. So, um, getting some boundaries around that. So that might mean changing your social media. It might mean, which I would recommend anyhow, um, maybe even leaving the old one up so they're not aware that you're getting a new one. If you get a new one, have a completely different name, different photos, all of that. Google yourself, see what comes up. Do an image search, see what images come up, see what everything that's on the internet about you. So then that way you can kind of see because what you see is what they see. Um, what kind of changes need to be made with that. If you possibly need to consider some security around where you live, kind of just get the basics in place and um, and then try to just get busy living your life. So to those who haven't ever experienced a very persistent problematic person, that can sound like hypervigilant behavior. But if a person has shown if it's been years and they're still bothering you with no reaction on your end, then, um, then some degree of hypervigilance is appropriate. And again, you don't need anybody to vote on what you do, and you don't have to listen to what I say either. But I personally found it was just easier to um, kind of assume the worst and then like reverse engineer my plan for that. So, oh, well, thank you, Monica. She says, I just know one thing, and that is that you saved my life. Well, I'm really glad. I'm really glad for that. And I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad um, that you're moving forward in your healing. So let me see here. Let me scroll up. Oh, wow. Monica says, yeah, Dana, do you know that you saved my life a couple years back? I was totally lost. I did not know where I was going. And the night I decided to end it all, I saw your video. Wow. Wow. Well, I'm just outrageously thankful that you're still here and that you were able to uh, get some clarity and validation when you needed it most. So, yeah, this is a wonderful community. It's awesome. I just the people here in the chat, the support that they give, the questions that they ask, all of it is just really, really cool. And mm, we're so fortunate to live in a time of the internet that can connect us in so many ways. I just this going through all of this is hard enough in general. I cannot imagine going through this s- um, well, I can because I did go through it alone because it never even dawned on me to look on the internet for what I was experiencing. But now that I've experienced this level of connection and everything, it's uh, what an ocean of difference it makes to be able to to have other people that get it. Monica says, sometimes it's just that we need someone to validate our feelings, and even if it's a lie. I'm assuming that you're meaning that their validation isn't sincere because because your feelings are real. Like you feel how you feel. And I think when a person has that a sincere level of validation, it's validating how a person feels. Even if um, there's concerns that, okay, well, maybe these feelings might be a little bit misplaced, or um, um, there's some boundary stuff, there's other stuff going on. Like none of that really matters because a person feels how they feel. The other stuff, um, kind of appropriate accountability, appropriate responsibility, getting clear on terms, like the differences, but like we are talking earlier, differences between guilt and shame and regret and these kinds of things that can come later on in the conversation, but in the moment, a person feels how they feel, and that's valid. So let me scroll up here. Abby says hi, and she has a bruised eye. Are you doing? Yeah. How are you doing, Abby? Is everything going okay? Or what's going on? Okay. And Faith, when she was talking about making that declaration to not let this abuse ruin her life, not let it end her life, not let it ruin her life, and then to use it for her highest and greatest good, and then to use it for the highest and greatest good of others. She says, Dana, yes, it just changed everything. It gave me direction. And that was a big turning point. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, when we can channel uh, kind of our um, pain into a purpose, it's that's powerful. It's really powerful. Okay, so Gamer Christina says, do you think this is toxic behavior of myself, or is it okay to enjoy the attention? My page got 4,000 followers in 2 months using no hashtags. I only meant to post one video. Well, okay, so let's examine this. Um, and this is so hard to do. It's so hard to have a back and forth discussion in a chat. uh, okay, so what about that would you think would be toxic? So while you're answering that, I'll give you my 2 cents. Um, I guess in a nutshell, how I define toxic, toxic behavior in general, it's something that's hurtful or harmful to ourselves or to others. And so gaining, putting I don't know, a video or a series of videos or stuff out on social media and getting a huge response to it, I don't see anything hurtful or harmful about that. Now, um, and there's definite times of like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like, I can't believe I did this, or um, and there's nothing wrong with that. You created something, you put it into the world, and it was warmly received. That's exciting. Where that can start taking a turn, but it doesn't have to take a turn, but where it can take a turn is when we're kind of living or dying based on those numbers. If our self-esteem is really tied to that of, oh, well, I got, 4,000 followers in 2 months. And then let's say then the third month, you only get 500, or you're used to getting, I don't know, 1,000 likes on something. And then the next week you only get 100. Social media in general, it ebbs and flows. And uh, having kind of a healthy level of detachment and well, not even just with social media, I think with any creative process, like putting your work into the world, it's going we that really kind of have a limited control over how it's received. This holds true for actors, for painters, for writers, for content creators, for you name it. And so I think kind of knowing that of, um, if you're, I guess it depends on the motivation you have behind your content. So if your motivation um, is to create things and put them out into the world, then have that be your motivation. If your motivation is more about like metrics and conversions and, I don't like running it like a business and all of that, then yeah, then the numbers are more important. Um, but then that's its own level of skill of kind of learning which metrics are considered like quote unquote vanity metrics and which metrics are the ones to really focus on. So it's kind of uh, and then not to internalize it, because that's the other thing with social media is it's very easy to get kind of caught up in the whole comparisonitis, looking around and seeing what are other people doing and am I measuring up and all of this. And it can be very inducing. You've probably seen YouTube videos where creators, they've had a few videos go viral or um, whatever, and then they just kind of crack after like a year or so because they're pushing themselves so hard to put out all this content or do all these things. So a lot of it just starts kind of getting clear on like what is your motivation for this, and is this something, yeah, I guess, what is your motivation for it? Is this something that you enjoy? And is this something that you want to continue doing? And with anything, not just with social media, but any path you go down in life, kind of getting clear with yourself of how will you know when something stops becoming nourishing? Like what are some signs that you might need to take a different approach or to switch things up completely? So what does it look like for you when something's nourishing? What does it look like for you when something's draining or toxic? What does burnout look like for you? And ideally, what does it look like when you're getting crispy? Like before you're burned out, what does crispiness look like? What does crispiness feel like? What are some changes that you notice in yourself? So, um, yeah, so I don't think experiences in life are necessarily like, um, more so than what we make them, and kind of that intention and how we, if we're internalizing them, I guess. Oh, wait a minute. Crit Gamer Christina says, read my first comment before that question. Okay, let me see. Yeah, yeah. Let me scroll. Was was that the first part, or now I'm all confused? Hmm. Let me scroll. Um, okay. I think I got it. I got 2 thumbs up from Gamer Christina. So okay. I'm guessing I answered it. Good deal. Let's see. Monica asked Dana, I'm writing my book now, and I go through so many blockages when I sit down and write. How did you get over that when you were writing your book? Um, oh boy, it's a process. Writing a book is difficult in so many ways that I never anticipated it to be. um, oh boy, I think it helps to think of it instead of thinking like, oh, I'm going to write a book. It helps to think of it as that you're just writing a chapter. So, uh, to start kind of by chapter, because that's really what a book is. It's just a series of chapters, right? So if we can kind of chunk it down, and each chapter, I mean, depending on how long your book is maybe going to be like, I don't know, 4,000 words, which sounds like a lot, but it goes pretty quick. Um, so kind of chunking it down, realizing what you're into. Uh, the writing process, it involves a lot of compassion and a lot of patience. And it can absolutely feel maddening because the way that you perceive your words is, at least for me, it's going to depend a lot on the mood that you're in at the time. It's the weirdest thing for me. If I have a day that I consider like a really good writing day and I leave my computer feeling good, I'm like, yeah, man, ran the ball down the field today. It's good. Got somewhere. And then the next day I open up my computer and I'm like, what happened here? This is like monkeys on a typewriter. This is garbage. It's what was I thinking? And it's not always that extreme. Sometimes I leave the day thinking I like what I wrote, and then I wake up the next morning and I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good. It's a whole mixed bag. And so I guess just kind of prepare for that. It's an emotional roller coaster, and you know, it's a whole process. And learning, reading, or hearing and talking to other writers helped me a lot. Kind of realize, like, hearing about their own writing process was very helpful. Kind of picking up pointers about kind of more of that mindset behind writing, or how like they would carve things up. There's wonderful software out there if you are going to continue writing. It's called Scrivener, and I highly recommend it. It's so much easier than using Word. Um, so there's tutorials on it out there, but you can drag and drop chapters around. It's so much easier. So kind of like learning the different software that's out there, finding a writing group. or some like quick beta readers or test readers, people that are in kind of in the group that would read your book. So having them read it, or reading a chapter at a time, and having them give very specific constructive feedback is incredibly helpful. Um, Learning how to accept constructive criticism and feedback can be very challenging. Creating a book, especially if it's, your story, it's deeply personal, and getting any type of feedback can feel like an attack. So there's um, yeah, that's its own process. If you were to get a formal edit on a book, I will tell you they mark it up like crazy. There's 20 to 30 plus edits per page. So that can be very jarring if you're not expecting that. Um, and the reading the reviews can be difficult. So it's so kind of realizing, okay, if I'm going to go read the reviews, or if I'm going to read the comments or whatever, I need to be in the right mind space for that. I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot. Kind of giving yourself a deadline too helps. So thinking about it in terms of, okay, I'm going to have like a rough draft done in 3 months. And this is what my rough draft is going to look like, or this is what it's going to involve. And then, um, then I'll have like a working rough draft after that, which maybe has more feedback and more ideas and this, that, and the other. And, um, then doing maybe a final draft, having some test readers read through it, getting their feedback, kind of adding that into the mix, polishing it up, maybe sending it to an editor at that point. So yeah, and then I would look at doing a search for other writers on, uh, like on YouTube. It can be helpful to just hear the process of, especially professional writers and their learning curve. There's one gal I absolutely adore. Her name is Joanna Penn, and um, she's an author, and an author slash entrepreneur. So she's a full-time writer, and she has a podcast and a show. It's all about writing, and if you're into that, it's very enjoyable. So, okay. Dennis says, can you tell me where we are at? Are we talking about writing as a way to heal? Well, welcome, Dennis. We were actually just kind of talking about writing in general. But writing, you're right about writing, that it can absolutely be a way to heal. So I think a lot of people who have experienced abuse find either journaling or writing their story to be a very cathartic process. What you decide to do with it after you're done is, obviously it's completely up to you. Some people have moved forward to publish their story. Um, some people, that's not their goal. They just wanted to get everything down. Let's see here. Oh, Monica asked, Dana, how do you spell Scrivener? It is Scrivener. Scrivener. Dennis asks, were there good questions tonight? Practical questions addressing narcissism? Uh, yes, yes, there were. I think it had to do more with kind of healing from it. I guess you could say that's probably more of our ongoing topic. Oh, I love that. Embers mentions a book called Writing to Heal by Mark Matusik. I will have to check that out. So, and Dennis is saying, "Oh, it's my first time on your live stream." Yes. Well, welcome, Dennis. We're kind of wrapping up at the tail end here. If you or anybody else has any questions that you would like answered, you can free to email me at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com. You can also, if you're interested in finding or being notified when I go live, you can text the words Dana Live to the number 22999 if you are in the United States. So, okay. So, with that said, yeah, JJ says there's always some good questions. I agree. I think all the questions are good, very valid. I was trying to think about it in terms of, were we really discussing narcissism? I I don't feel like we really were. It was more of just kind of the healing from um, the pathological narcissism of others. So, okay. So with that said, let's wind down. We normally do like a guided, well, we're getting back in the routine of doing a guided meditation to kind of wrap things up. So for anybody that would like to join in that, uh, let's take some time and get comfortable. So finding a comfortable spot in a chair or a couch or a bed, wherever you might be. And allowing yourself to just take some time and be fully centered in this moment. Taking a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And again. Allowing yourself to become centered in this moment. Noticing the temperature of the air around you. If it's a little too cool or a little warm, or perhaps if it's just right. Noticing any sounds that are going on around you. And noticing any sounds that are going on inside you. Maybe your stomach is rumbling, hearing your heartbeat. And continuing to breathe. Feeling the fabric or the surfaces around you. noticing kind of what each feels like. Is it smooth? Is it cold? Is it soft? Is it scratchy? Is it cushiony? And now bringing your attention to each breath and feeling each breath as it travels down deep into the bases of your lungs, allowing your chest to easily and effortlessly rise and fall with each breath. And being fully present in this moment. And in this moment, releasing any regret or any guilt or any anger from the past that's ready to be released. And releasing any tension or anxiety, any fear or any stress about the future. And allowing yourself to be fully present in this moment. And that you are here and that you are safe. And that you are able to create a peaceful place for yourself. Taking some time to just acknowledge all of the different tools that you've been learning, all of the skills that you have. You know how to protect yourself. You can protect yourself through distance, through your boundaries, through standards, through deal breakers, through being assertive, through cutting off contact, through changing up your email or your social media. There are lots of things that you have control over, that you are powerful and that you are capable, you are brave, you are resilient, and that you have come such a long way. And now let's take a moment to do like a scan of our body. So, kind of just scanning your body, noticing if there's any places that you're storing tension. And if you come across one, kind of thinking about what size or shape or color that tension is. And as you breathe in this beautiful, white, healing light. Breathing it right into that tension. and watching it just dissolve. Watching it dissolve and change colors just easily and effortlessly. And allowing that beautiful cleansing light to fill your body, to travel down into your arms and fingers, down into your chest and your hips, and down into your thighs and your calves and your feet and your toes. Knowing that you are connecting with everything that is good and right in the world, that is good and right within you. Noticing how much lighter you feel as each spot of tension just gets unknotted and just kind of fades away. And allowing yourself to take some comfort in knowing that you can become your own peaceful place, and that we don't need to wait for others to change or for situations to become peaceful, and that we can turn inward and we can recreate this moment anytime that you need to. And when you're ready, come on back and open your eyes. So, you guys, thank you so much. Um, for being here, for all of your questions, for supporting each other, all of it. And as always, just lots of love to you guys. You are not alone and you are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care and have a lovely rest of your evening. I'll see you next week. Okay. Good night.